Well, welcome to Stronger Together. This is the capstone session in the Collective Power and Leadership track. I'm Maggie Glasgow, and on behalf of the Philanos Board, I want to welcome you all here to learn from some of the best leaders we have in the collective giving space. I also want to acknowledge our co-host volunteer, Barb Van Winkle, who's been handling logistics. Barb's a member of the Women's Giving Circle of Howard County, Maryland, and our Philanos Board treasurer. My job here is really short. I have the privilege of introducing Tony Bowen, who will moderate today's panel with his fellow speakers, Sara Lomelin and Jeannie Sager, both of whom have many interesting sagas and data to share. So let me tell you a little bit about Tony Bowen. Tony partners with the Fidelity Charitable Board of Trustees to lead a strategic grant-making program dedicated to inspiring donors to give more to promising nonprofits so that our communities can flourish. He spent his entire career improving the ability of foundations and nonprofits to better meet their visions and build more equitable and empowered futures for those with less access to power and resources. Prior to joining Fidelity Charitable, Tony was a lead consultant at BDO FMA, a national consulting firm dedicated to building the confidence of nonprofit leaders, where he launched FMA's DC office and led FMA's pandemic relief efforts to get support for thousands of nonprofits, and many of those that you know. Before that, Tony was a managing director at Democracy Fund, a national private foundation. He's also worked at the Annie E. Casey Foundation here in Baltimore, Grantmakers for Effective Organizations, GuideStar, and numerous family and community foundations. So please join me in welcoming Tony Bowen, the executive director of the Fidelity Charitable Catalyst Fund.
Thank you, Maggie. Really appreciate that introduction. Thank you, Philanos, for having me here today. I absolutely love this conference. One of my favorite movies is Hairspray. So I'm going to say good morning, Baltimore. I'm surprised we haven't been singing it more often. Good morning. So absolutely thrilled to be here. And we're going to do some quick intros about our organizations and a little bit more on our background to get going. But we are here to talk about data, about innovation, and also to start doing some of the work around what are your key takeaways from our conference and all the time that we've had together. So a little bit about Fidelity Charitable and the work that I get to do. So Fidelity Charitable, in 2018, we became the nation's largest grant maker. And last year, we gave $11 billion, generosity of our donors, which is incredible. Serving almost 200,000 nonprofits received grants, right? So I have the best job at Fidelity Charitable, hands down. I run what is now being called the Fidelity Charitable Catalyst Fund. Board that 2 weeks ago, so before I did the slide. So really what we do is that everyone in this room feels confident about their giving. All right, let's try that. There we go. So some of our grantees are here today. You've gotten to hear about a lot of them, which is terrific. I have two up here, which makes me really happy. The Lilly School of Philanthropy, including the Women's Philanthropy Institute, which Jeannie gets to lead, and Sara's organization, Philanthropy Together. We have other grantees. We have Grapevine here, Community Investment Network. Obviously, Philanos, which you've been hearing about their support. We also have the Mississippi Alliance for Nonprofits and Philanthropy. Jamie's here, and so many other terrific organizations. One last thing about Fidelity Charitable, if you've not gotten your gift for giving, there is still the QR code. I ask, if I get any say in where you get to give, please give to your giving circle or give to a local nonprofit. And as Victoria mentioned this morning, local doesn't necessarily have to mean your backyard, but we're really here to help support promising nonprofits. And so we hope that you'll be able to do the same. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Sara to share a little bit more about her background and Philanthropy Together.
Thank you, Tony. And hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Sara Lomelin. I am the CEO of Philanthropy Together. And it's so funny that you mentioned hairspray, because this morning when I went into the balcony and I see the view and I'm like, good morning, Baltimore. Like I wanted to, bring my own, my inner John Travolta in me and start dancing there. But anyway, thank you so much, Maggie and the Philanos board for having us here. And I feel that, I am part of the Philanos family because our dear Paula Liang from Philanos, she was the chair at that moment. And Paula is one of the godmothers of Philanthropy Together. Same as Marsha Morgan from the Community Investment Network. Diane, you were, one of the very first godmothers of Philanthropy Together. So a little bit of who we are. We are a global field builder to catalyze the collective giving movement. We are the brainchild of more than 100 people. And thanks to Victoria, because you were who believed in us more than 6 years ago with a tiny idea in a Post-it about how do we support the growing American Giving Circle movement. And from that little Post-it, many meetings on a kitchen with bagels and fun and laughter, and then many hours of Zoom calls before Zoom was even popular. We should have bought, stock on Zoom at that moment. Philanthropy Together, the idea of Philanthropy Together came about. And we launched at the beginning of the pandemic, April 1st, 2020. It's not a joke. That was true. And a few months later, we realized that it was not only an organization that was going to support the American Giving Circle movement, but the global Giving Circle movement. We had people from Germany, from Australia, from China, from Chile, reaching out to us at a moment when we had 100 followers on Twitter. We were like, how are these people finding us? And something that you mentioned, Victoria, this morning, and has been the theme during these past couple of days, is the sense, and looking for community building, right? And at that moment in the pandemic, we were all stuck at home thinking, what is mine to give? And no one wanted to feel helpless. Everybody wanted to do something for the local communities. And that's how we started at Philanthropy Together. This past year, we added a second leg to the table of collective giving, which is collaborative funds. And we're working with many collaborative funds across the globe too. But the way we do our work is through those 4 strategic focus areas. We showcase, we scale, we strengthen and sustain the collective giving field. Showcase and scale is to bring new people into collective giving models, and then strengthening and sustain. We don't want anybody to reinvent the wheel. And I love the Philanos community that in every session, people are generous with the resources, right? Every session have PDFs and documents like, oh, we have this great form, please use it. And that is how, our whole field is about. We want other people that are starting giving circles to do it in the best possible way, and is, with your wisdom and the experience that all of you have. And then the last one, sustain. We want this field to be vibrant. We were just talking on our table that it is not rocket science what we do. It's hard, but anyone can do it. And imagine if we had every single community with a giving circle like yours. Imagine the generosity that we can unleash. And sorry, it took a little bit more time, but I'm going to pass it now to Jeannie.
Thank you so much. And it's so great to be on stage with Tony and Sara today. Really good friends in this work, partners in good, as I like to say often, and to be in this room with so many friendly faces, folks that I have gotten to know over the last 3 years. So for those of you who I don't know, my name is Jeannie Sager, and I have the privilege of leading the Women's Philanthropy Institute, which is the only research institute in the world dedicated to looking at gender and philanthropy. And we happen to be located at the only School of Philanthropy in the world, at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. So thrilled to be here. How many of you in the room have heard of the Women's Philanthropy Institute and our work? Yay, big fans of yours. And so we're just really grateful that this work continues to be relevant and to resonate. But quite simply, what we do at WPI is we conduct, curate, and disseminate research that we hope grows women's philanthropy in particular. And so, as you can see from the slide, we have an annual signature report that looks at women, how women give. And that's the bulk of our research, is really about women as donors. And then recently, in the last, I would say 6 years, we had the opportunity to actually examine and look at women and girls as recipients of philanthropy, and created the Women and Girls Index, which measures giving to women's and girls or serving organizations here in the United States. And so that's a data point that maybe many of you have heard. So less than 2% of giving in the United States goes to organizations that primarily serve women and girls. Being frustrated by this non-movement of the needle, we partnered last year to spearhead a Give to Women and Girls Day. And so I'm really thrilled and grateful to folks like Philanthropy Together, Pivotal Ventures, Women Moving Millions, Philanos, Impact 100 Global came on as an anchor partner in the second year. And this is all in an effort to create a movement out of a moment. Our partners at Giving Tuesday, we were shocked to learn, shared with us that there wasn't an existing community that primarily focused on giving to women and girls. So, and I think Give to Women and Girls Day and the Women and Girls Index in particular are a great example of how we can use research to help change or encourage or inspire donor behavior. And that's what we really focus on. And that's my role. That's really my role at WPI, is that research to practice peace. And so what we hope is, and what we hope from today, is to really look at what the data shows us about how women give, and how we want to be met in the moment, to build the confidence to know that what you're doing is the right way to do it. So often we get stuck. So really, and one of our taglines at WPI is research is just the beginning. It's what you do with it that matters. And so really grateful to have opportunities like the last day and a half for all of us to do a deep dive into learning more, learning together, and learning how to stand confidently in philanthropy as agency. So really thrilled to be here with all of you. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Jeannie. Thanks, Sara. So you can tell why when the Philanos board asked me to moderate this, it was a very easy yes. Super excited for today's session. So a little bit more on what we're going to cover today. We gave you a little bit of a preview. We want to share some of the latest data and giving trends. We're actually very lucky that we're going to hear some new data that I don't know that any other audience has heard before. I have not seen the slides yet. It's that breaking. So that's exciting. We're also going to talk about what are the recent innovations with everything that's been happening with COVID and since the murder of George Floyd. How have giving circles innovated to really step up across the country and across the globe? And then we hope to equip you with how to myth bust with a little bit of data, right? Maybe common misperceptions that people have about joining giving circles. And then what's one new thing that you can do to try back at home with your giving circle? So we did our introductions. Now it's time for you all to do yours at your tables. I'd like to do a pair share. So you're going to turn to someone next to you. And please share your name, what giving circle or organization that you're with, where you're from. And if you already know the person next to you, fun fact you've learned about giving circles while at PowerUp. So we got about 3 minutes. Please say hi to each other. All right. Hi, everyone. I love a loud room. It actually puts a smile on my face. It means y'all are having good conversations. All right, we're going to come back together. I will not do a clap once teacher thing. I have too much stuff on my hands right now.
Hello, ladies. Can you hear me?
There we go. There we go. All right. Hopefully you got to meet someone new at your table as we get going with the session. So now we're going to ground our conversation in some data. And I've asked Jeannie to think through a couple things here. What do we sort of know about the size and scope of giving circles? What's some of the new research that's come out in the last couple of years? And what do we know about the power of women as philanthropists? And so Jeannie's going to share a little bit of data with us. We will have a couple minutes for Q&A for this section before we move on to the next as well. So please feel free to jot down a couple questions.
Yeah, so I'll start with your last question about what do we know about kind of the power and potential of women as donors. And so really this is really about the data. So what is the data that kind of demonstrates the growth in women's wealth and influence? And so I think we could all agree in this room by most measures, today's demographics and demographic changes benefit women. We all see this and feel this every day. So there are three key predictors or influencers of philanthropy in which women are on lead, and that's education, wealth, and income, right? So today, more than 50% of all degrees, bachelor's, master's, and doctorates are being earned by women. In fact, I just read an article out of the Wall Street Journal that said that 50% of women at the top of their class in 5 of the top world's business school are women now. So, I mean, that's really changing. Yeah, who's going to be in those boardrooms is really changing here. And then in terms of wealth, Diane mentioned some of this earlier. We now control 32% of global wealth. We contribute $5 trillion globally annually. And the Boston Consulting Group says that by 2025, which is really, quite frankly, right around the corner, women will have accumulated assets worth $110 trillion. And as Diane mentioned, 70% of the wealth that's going to be passed down over the next 2 generations is going to be received by women. And women tend to inherit twice, right? So both from their parents and then from their spouses. But they're also more and more women are becoming the primary breadwinner in their families. And in fact, 40% of U.S. women who work actually out-earn their husbands. When asked, reports suggest that 90% of women say that they are the chief financial officers of their households. And we know from the work that we do at WPI and that women are on lead in terms of household giving decision making. And while 6 out of 10 households make giving decisions together, 80% of those conversations have a woman on lead in some shape or form. So always important to have a woman at the table. So a lot of our research can be grouped into kind of 3 themes: women give broadly, women give collectively, and women give holistically. And so when I talk about women giving broadly, that really is about an expanded definition of philanthropy. It's not just about money. It's about time and talent and testimony and advocacy, and your social ties. When I talk about collectively, it's why you all are in the room. Women like to give together, and we'll talk a little bit about those slides in a minute, and then women give holistically. So when asked, women will say that empathy drives their giving. They can, and Victoria's story that she started off this morning is a perfect example of that. It's being able to understand and see homelessness and feel and understand what food insecurity might be like, see what happens in, what's happening across the world in a disaster, and have a sense of what that might be like for your family. And that's what motivates giving for women, is that empathy piece. But we're here to talk about giving circles. And so what I'm excited to share is that in a minute, hopefully, and very soon, thanks to our partners at Philanthropy Together, we're going to be able to update some of this research that I have on the screen. So this is yes, and I want to big plug for why research is important, and because again, it inspires and brings confidence. So this work was sponsored by the Gates Foundation and coordinated by the Women's Philanthropy Institute with the Giving Circles Research Group back in 2017. So what that group found was that in between 2007 and 2017, the number of giving circles had tripled during that time period. About 70% of giving circles say that women are the majority of their membership. At that time, giving circles had put $1.3 billion out into the community. What I think the work around the 3 reports, which you can find online, and with really wonderful resources, infographics, questions that you can use in your own giving circles to encourage conversation. But it's that middle graphic that I want to talk about, is that 60% of giving circles are formed around identity. And I think you've heard this throughout the conference, that it's really important when we understand philanthropy and we understand giving, that we understand that intersection of all of our identities. And giving circles are really a wonderful way to kind of stand and come together under an identity, but then also, so we call it bridging and building, right? And so being able to come together under an identity, come together under a cause, and an interest or an issue, and then distribute and find a way to support causes in your community while coming together under your identity. So I think it's really important to kind of think through the work that is happening in that space as we try and invite more people to philanthropy. I think another interesting piece about the work that was done back in 2017 is the qualitative work that we did in interviewing members of giving circles. So, and how powerful giving circles have been for women in particular, where they've been able to like step up into leadership roles. They are learning about their community. They are being inspired to give on their own outside of their community. And in some cases, and I know some of you in the room are beginning to understand, and it's not just about giving. It's about how do we create systems change. So now we have giving circles that are lobbying at their state houses, right? And so really understanding the upstream effect of the work that they were introduced in their grant making, right? So what we also know about members of giving circles is that they're more proactive and more strategic about their own giving. Their circles are more diverse. So not just the giving circles that they're in, but who they talk to about their giving. And so I often say to fundraisers, if you meet somebody who you've come to find out is in a giving circle, you've got a smart, strategic, thoughtful giver in sitting across from you. And so lean in to that conversation. Do I have another slide? Next slide. So what has happened since we last met in 2020? So I was really excited to be with everybody for Philanos. It was Catalyst back then. Am I allowed to say that name? Catalyst. Back in Seattle in 2020, but a lot has happened, as we know. That was the last large gathering that I attended in Seattle. I was telling people earlier, I felt a little bit like Typhoid Mary. Every place I went, I was like, what's going on? But it's not, yeah. So Seattle was in Seattle. So what's happened since? So we were able to survey a general population the summer of 2020 and came out with 2 reports. One was about COVID-19, generosity and gender. And as you'll see, a lot of the same themes about what we know as women as donors really was amplified during COVID-19. People wanted to give. People wanted to figure out ways to give. And I want to highlight that report in particular, because as we talked about what was happening during that moment in time, we also heard stories about how giving circles in particular became frontline providers in their local communities, because they were closest, they were the most proximate to understanding who really was serving their communities and out there in COVID-19. And because of the way, the flexibility and the ease of getting money out, truly, giving circles became heroes in their communities during COVID-19.
I have a couple of stories about that, if I can plug them in.
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, big shout out to the networks of giving circles, because when the murder of George Floyd happened, that first protest was on a Friday, and I got a call on Saturday from Paula and from Way Green, that was leading Honeycomb, a network of Jewish teen giving circles, asking, what are we doing as a community of collective givers? On Monday, we had a call with the Brain Trust, all the representatives from the networks. And in a couple of days, at that moment, Marsha said, I'll get the speaker. We need to get everybody together. We mobilized 700 people on a Zoom call to learn how giving circles could, react, and how can we change our practices to, attack the moment. We did this long before, and I'm saying long before because there were days, but it seemed like years before the big foundations actually got together and got their program officers and started talking to each other. And that's, the velocity and the rapidness of how we can move as everyday givers. And another story, during COVID, giving circles mobilizing, calling their grantees and saying, what do you need? We don't care about, applications. We don't care about reporting. What do you need? We saw giving circles, buying industrial refrigerators for their grantees, moving out money. A lot of giving circles that were going to give grants in June in person, and suddenly they cannot meet in person. We were something as easy as, giving Zoom accounts for $14.99 a month, helped giving circles not to leave any money on the table and mobilize grants.
That was a kind of a backdoor to trust-based philanthropy for so many giving circles who were really thinking about it, but didn't really know how to start the conversation or get everybody on board. So really interesting. Wanted to lift up our Women Give 2022 report, which looked at the intersection of racial justice, gender, and giving. So as you all know, women have, really been, they've had a long history of working for civil rights and racial justice in the United States. And as we know today, women have more resources and influence to affect change more than ever before, and have been and are at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement. So what's interesting about this study, in light of some of the sessions that some of you have attended, especially around how do we be more inclusive, how do we think about diversity and equity and belonging, is that the study found a real, what we call say-do gap. So during the summer of 2020, 4 in 10 households, so 40% of households shared that they were actively involved in the racial justice protests. But only 14% of households gave money to support racial justice causes and organizations. So that's just something to think about. And especially now that we're in 2023 and considering where all of these commitments from foundations and from corporations and from individual donors, what's happening there, and what role can giving circles play in making sure that that momentum continues, and maybe we fill that gap, that say-do gap, and thinking through how data can help, put a marker on that for folks, and that say-do piece. And then the last study is actually from my colleagues at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, which I think is really interesting and aligns well with what we know about women and donors. But so their study is called "What Americans Think About Philanthropy and Nonprofits." And what I want to say is that I think this study began to show more and more that not just women, but in particular younger donors and Americans understand that philanthropy isn't just the giving of money. It is about time and talent and testimony. And younger people, women, people with more education and donors really do have this more expansive view of what constitutes philanthropy. And so really thinking through about what those engagement opportunities are. The data point that I really want to uplift, because I find it perplexing, and I think all of you will too. So philanthropy and nonprofits are viewed more positively than government and for-profit entities. But yet, despite these generally favorable opinions, just 5.4% of people surveyed said they or anyone in their immediate family received services from a charitable organization or nonprofit in the past year. Now let's think about your day-to-day life, right? And where nonprofits come into play. So your hospital, your church, your school, where you work out. So there's an educational opportunity, I think, for average everyday Americans to really understand the role of not-for-profits and how they are integral to our lives and their communities that we live in. And so how can giving circles and the work that you do with those you serve, how can you amplify that work for everybody in your community? So those are just three. And again, all online, all accessible. Just visit the website, and you can go as deep into the studies as you'd like. Diane likes to really highlight everything. But there are, for those of you who like it curated, we do have executive summaries, really friendly infographics that help bring the research to life. So thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Jeannie. Love a good infographic. So you just got 6 studies in 15 minutes. Woo, good work, Jeannie. And a big thanks to Bank of America and Gates Foundation for supporting a lot of this research. One of the things also, so as a funder, as I went to bat for the grants that you've been hearing about here, I need this data to go to bat, right? Sara and I sat in the board meeting for Fidelity Charitable, and we were citing a bunch of data that got people. Sara did a great job of telling some stories from the heart as well, as she does so brilliantly. But it was the data that really convinced our board to really understand the power that's in this room. So when you get asked to participate in a survey from Jeannie or Sara or someone else, I highly encourage you to participate. It helps us go to bat for you. So I want to do something a little bit differently with Q. We have about 5 minutes for some questions here, but I want to do something a little differently. What I want for you to think about for some questions are, what are the common questions or myths that you hear about giving circles that you have to address to prospective members? So when you're out there recruiting, what are some myth busting things that you have to be like, ugh, this question again? Or what's a question that maybe you get stumbled on? So we're going to bring the mic around to a couple people.
You have to have a lot of money.
That you have to have a lot of money.
You have to have a lot of money. Great. I'm going to take 2 more.
When you think about the DEI piece, giving circles aren't for us.
DEI giving circles are not for us. Yep. Susan and Diane.
You have to be invited to join.
This is the most irritating one, I think. Giving circles are just intermediaries. They gather funds and then redistribute them.
All right. So that's a great starting point.
Only join one.
You can only,
Nice. You can only join one.
only join one. All right. So let's see.
And I have a good one too. That
You
they are
have to
doing
answer
a
it, so-
pyramid scheme.
Oh,
I got that one.
You got
I
pyramid
got that
scheme.
one. That question one.
well, as two people are often thinking about giving circles at a macro level, and often responding to these questions, let's take a couple of them. And let's see what we know from some of the research and the data and from our own stories. So you have to have a lot of money to be in a giving circle. What do we know about some of the data about giving circles that could help folks understand why that's a myth?
And all of you know this. There are giving circles that move millions every year. There are giving circles that move a few $1,000s every year. There is a wonderful young woman in Arizona, Lilly. She started a giving circle with teenagers, and each teen gives $25 a quarter. And, they get their money from washing cars, walking dogs, the stipend, whatever, however they can get it. And they give together every quarter. And they support organizations that are focused on adolescents, right? Mental health, homelessness, et cetera, et cetera. There are many giving circles when there is this whole idea of giving $1 a day, right? There's giving circles that have a sliding scale. So younger members give a little bit less and, older members or members that are, more advanced in their career. So no, you don't have to have a lot of money to join a giving circle, and certainly not just one. You can join many giving circles. How many of you are members of more than one giving circle? I mean, look at that.
Love it. And I think for Grapevine, the default is $100 per quarter when you're opening a Grapevine giving circle. So that is accessible, right? That is possible. Question about diversity, which Jeannie, do you want to weigh in on?
So when I talk about giving circles in the research, I often talk about that giving circles are seeking to democratize philanthropy.
Yes.
A lot of the work that we share about the research around women and giving is in an effort to disrupt current norms around philanthropy and fundraising and who's allowed to be a philanthropist. And I think giving circles really provide opportunities to diversify who's in that ecosystem. So while women tend to still be the majority of giving circles, there's just been massive growth in the ecosystem, and Philanthropy Together is on lead for a lot of this. But it's not just women. It's, we've got LGBTQ plus groups, we have Asian American, we have Latin American, we have Jewish only, we have men only. Just as you shared, there's all kinds of different ways for people to come together. But the research shows that women are motivated by the fact that their maybe $100 gift may end up having a $10,000 impact. And that is something that most everyone can kind of get around in terms of leverage and amplification. And again, back to this identity piece, it's just a great entry point and accessible way to be a philanthropist and see impact.
Well, and how many times, because I spent 8 years at the Latino Community Foundation, and we had many members that were, new members, newcomers to the area that were joining a giving circle, and they said, I feel like I'm home. So how many times and I have heard from some of you that you moved to a new city, and the way for you to create that community was to join a giving circle or to start a giving circle. Because I feel that each of you can attest of the sisterhood that you are finding in your giving circle. It's not only about, learning together and giving together, but it's also the people that share your values, right? And in terms of diversity, I know Jeannie was talking about, the horrible number of the percentage of dollars that go to women and girls. But yes, with different communities, only 0.3% of philanthropic dollars go to the LGBTQ community. I was hearing that at the global level, it's 0.6% going to indigenous groups. So the power that we have as Giving Circle members is changing. People tried at one time, this journalist really tried to put words in my mouth. He was like, so you're saying that billionaires shouldn't be giving? I'm like, no. We do need their money, yes. And we need everybody's engagement. Because when we change the power of philanthropy from, a few hands and a few decision-making people into all of our hands, we are changing not only who gives, but how we give, with trust, with urgency, with, as we learned this morning, when you feel angry, we take action. And also what gets funded. As you all know, Giving Circles are seed funders for small grassroots nonprofits that a lot of big foundations don't even know about because they're small.
Great. So I'm going to take one more, which is you have to be invited to join a Giving Circle. How many of you have ever been on the Giving Circle directory that Philanthropy Together and Grapevine have put together? All right, about half the room. Sara, do you want to share a little bit more about the directory?
Yes, and actually this directory was born out of the 2016-2017 research. That research lived in a really clunky Excel spreadsheet.
That's how we roll.
That no one could access. Remember Paula, going into that, oh my God. So Grapevine started a day before Philanthropy Together. And we knew from the very beginning that we were not in the market to build a tech tool or build anything. So we partnered with Grapevine to put that data out in the open in a friendly way, in a way that, people looking to join a Giving Circle, you can go on the directory, you can put different keywords like, women and girls or Latinx Giving Circles, or, you can put your zip code and it will show those Giving Circle near you. And if you don't find a Giving Circle near you, I'm preaching to the choir here because all of you are part of Giving Circles, but if you want to start another one, you are invited also to get another one up and running. So please, when you get home, just take a look at the directory and make sure that your information is there and that it's updated, because that directory has become, the most updated information. We want to know how many members you have, if you are open to get new members, the grants that you have given, what are those organizations that you are supporting? Because as Jeannie said and Tony said, we need that research to make the ask for support for Giving Circles.
And as you care about trying to recruit new members into your Giving Circle, someone like me at Fidelity Charitable, I need a directory to send our donors, right? And so we actually will link to the Giving Circle directories when a donor says, how do I get more involved in my community? Look in the directory, right? And so these kind of centralized resources and infrastructure, they're critical for our growth and our engagement. Thanks for doing a little myth busting there. So now we're going to shift a little bit here and talk about what have been some innovations in collective giving over the last 3 to 4 years. So Sara and Jean, I'm just going to ask you to jump in as you want here on some of these questions. And let's just learn a little bit about some new things that have been going on. So I'm curious, as you reflect on the last couple of years, how have you seen collective giving models shift? What have been some key things over the last 3 to 4 years that you've seen?
I think the big one, and I loved how many sessions around trust-based philanthropy happened today, right? Well, yesterday and this morning, I think there was another one. But yes, in COVID, we started to see that shift, and many given circles have been doing trust-based philanthropy for many, many, many years, right? We just didn't have the name of trust-based philanthropy. And if you look at the principles of trust-based philanthropy, again, it's not rocket science, it's common sense, and it's just literally trying to see your community partners, your grantees as people from your community, taking off, out all those power dynamics that Victoria talked about of, givers and receivers. We're part of the same local community. We're part of the same ecosystem. We need each other. And when we, shift that of saying, I'm not here, I don't have more power because I have the money. It's like, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of your cause and to find, that those funds that you, nonprofit leader, need, to fund those programs that no one else wants you to fund. One of the very first grants that my giving circle, the Peninsula Latina Giving Circle, gave was back in 2015. To an organization in San Mateo County in California. We wanted to support survivors of domestic violence. And the only organization in the county, huge organization doing great work, didn't have a single Spanish-speaking caseworker. Yes, Barb, I see your face. In San Mateo County, California. We're like, how can that be possible? Right? So we always get into the practice of coming to our grantees, and instead of saying, oh, we want you to do that, or we want to give you money for that project, is asking, what is that you want to do? And you cannot get the funding for that. So we have seen a lot of, shift into more trust-based philanthropy practices. We also have seen a lot of solidarity giving circles. So giving circles that, for example, there is a giving circle also in California called the Lunar Project. And it's a group of young Asian Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders, Americans, with a lot of wealth. And they are supporting Black-led organizations in Oakland. So we are also seeing a lot of these types of giving circles when a certain identity gets together, but they also pass the decision-making and the power of the decision-making to the community. And that's extremely important. Another, initiative that started a few years ago, then it got kind of dormant, and we're just hoping that it gets back up again, is the interfaith giving circle against hate. I think right now more than ever is extremely important. And last week, we had a beautiful call with our Brain Trust. And we have, Jewish partners, we have Muslim partners, we have Palestinian partners, and just being in the same Zoom room together, but people being extremely vulnerable of needing this community. Because again, I feel that something that is important in giving circles is the space for discourse that in each meeting we create, right? That you put your individual decision-making and your individual will in the back burner for the sake of the group. And a lot of times we change our minds, right? Like we come to the meeting saying, I want that organization to get the grant. And maybe that is not going to happen. And we're okay with that because we chose to be part of a collective giving group. So I will say trust-based philanthropy is the big one.
Love it. Jeannie, anything else you've seen?
The only thing that I would add is this desire for more education. so that these groups are not only coming together to learn about their communities and grant out, they're also actually coming together to learn how to be better philanthropists or more strategic philanthropists. And so I've seen that kind of across the country, this real interest, and being able from these collective giving groups, identifying education as a piece of the mission and as a piece of something that they're offering those members.
Absolutely. So
Just to add, when you were talking about, the 1.3 billion, right? Every time people said, oh, giving circles are cute. We're not cute. I mean, we are cute people, but we're very powerful. And that is something that we need to shout from the roofs is, yes, we're not a group of women, sitting and sipping wine and having tea sandwiches. No, we get things going and moving. And I feel that's very important to talk about. And you mentioned about advocacy. There's so many giving circles that are taking that next level. And I invite you all to do it, because guess what? You don't have to be a 501c4 to do advocacy. You can be a 501c3, you can be a volunteer organization. There is research, talking about research. A few years ago, the Latino Community Foundation partnered with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to do research about the intersection between being part of a giving circle and civic engagement. That report is going to be published, hopefully, by the end of the year. And the numbers are incredible. People that are part of giving circles, that for many people, this is the very first entry door into philanthropy. My God, the moment you see the challenges of your community, you cannot unsee. You become part of the PTO, you become part of your neighborhood association, you run for office, you be part of a commission, you go and, register people to vote. We are important for the fabric of our society and for democracy. And, many, many giving circles that are here are, taking that change into their own hands. So next year, in many countries around this world, we have elections, and very important elections. And no matter for who you are going to vote, what we cannot afford as a society is, this being apathetic, right? We need to take action and be also the voice for many people that cannot use their voices. One of the most, impactful stories also from a giving circle meeting was this young man, maybe 19 years old. And he came to speak on behalf of an organization that was supporting refugees and doing civic engagement and registering people to vote. And he said that he was going to the different colleges in the San Jose area to get students to register to vote. He is undocumented. He cannot vote. But he is more, instead of just being and sitting down and saying, okay, there's nothing I can do, he is mobilizing people to be the voice that he cannot have. So let's get also our children, because I know most of us have grown children. Let's get our children to also be, those beacons of democracy.
yes, yes. I think just two other trends I would recognize. One is women of color have been involved in collective giving for centuries. They are finally getting recognition for all the power that they bring. I've been so proud of the Philanthropy Planning Committee, which I had nothing to do with. All of the women of color speakers that have been brought up has been super inspiring for me as someone that has been going to wonky philanthropy conferences for almost 20 years. Thank God, right? And so I think that's been terrific to see. More work to be done, but that has warmed my heart. The other has been the rise of digital giving circles, right? And I think COVID really helped with that in terms of being able to come over on Zoom. But Grapevine is a big player in this, and we now have thousands of more people that are involved in giving circles because we can use the power of technology to then come together in those places as well. So we're going to bring it back to some table conversations. We've been chatting here for a while, and we want you to turn to someone new, maybe someone you didn't talk to beforehand when you did the pair shares earlier. And you get to answer one of two questions, or if we have time, you can answer both of them. The first is, would love for you all to chat about with someone at your table. How have you seen your giving circle shift in the last 2 to 3 years? What have you tried that's new that you're learning from? And option 2 could be, what's a new partnership you formed tied to your giving circle? We've talked a lot about new collaborations and new ways of working together, and how has it benefited your giving circle's work? So take a couple seconds to reflect on these questions. Pick one that you want to share with someone, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes. We're going to come back together in about a minute so we can have a couple report outs. The room self-quieted. That has never happened for me before. All right, so we'll come back together. I would love to hear a couple of report outs. Maggie will assist here. So let's hear 2 answers to option number 1. How have you seen your giving circle shift in the last 2 to 3 years? Can we get 2 volunteers to answer that question? Great, right up front.
Hi, I'm Harriet Sugarman, representing Giving Together. We're based in Montgomery County, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. After George Floyd, we did some research and discovered that only 2% of philanthropic dollars went to Black-led, Black-serving organizations. So we created a separate grant track, and we worked with community foundations to identify emerging Black-led, Black-serving nonprofits. And we set up a slightly different grant application, keeping in mind that their resources were, somewhat narrower. And it has been very, very successful. So I'll stop there, but that was, and I've heard in other sessions that other people have done similar things.
Love it. Absolutely love it. One more example of something new or a shift that you've seen in the last 2 to 3 years at your giving circle. And yes, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name's Allie. I'm from the Spirit of St. Louis Women's Fund. So mine is new, as in really new this year.
Yeah.
But what we're exploring is moving to a 2-year grant cycle for all of our grants. And we would increase the dollar amount. So the interesting thing about it, though, would be that we wouldn't give 2-year grants every year, which is new. What we would do is we'd give, say in 2024, we get a 2-year grant, and just say we have $200,000, right? That's 8 grantees that would win $50,000. We'd pay them $25,000 in year 1, $25,000 in year 2. But in year 2, instead of accepting new applications, that would be our engagement year. So we would focus strongly and holistically on doing more and deeper engagements with the grantees that we have awarded money to. So that's something that we are actively doing right now. It's our first time, and we're looking forward to seeing how it may play out. But I just think it's a good opportunity, and everything I've learned here has been going beyond the check, and maybe this is a way to do that.
Love it. Love it. Great. All right. Question 2 here. What's a new partnership that you formed, and how has it benefited your giving circle's work? Right up front here.
Thank you. Hi, Teresa Alvarez with the Santa Barbara Latino Giving Circle. One thing that we have started doing this year is partnering with Latino-owned businesses. So not all of our mixers, but one of our mixers and our grants night was at a local-owned or Latino-owned winery, and they provided the space in kind and the wine in kind, and we, of course, blasted them on social media. Those 2 winemakers ended up becoming members of the Giving Circle, which was really great, provided matching funds that night. And any businesses that we're partnering with in terms of food, we support Latino-owned women businesses as well. So that's been a really neat partnership to have, helping each other out.
Excellent. Love that. All right. One more new partnership example. Yeah, new partnerships are hard, right? Yeah. And Sara, anything you want to note on that?
No, you're giving me ideas. And I feel that, and I'm going to talk about, the new research and the challenges of the new research. And if we get updated information for giving circles, we can do so much. The challenge for us is that, we have the connection to the networks, right? And some giving circles that have been, part of the We Give Summit, of part of our Equity and Justice in Collective Giving series, that we have. But we need the networks like, Philanos, Community Investment Network, APIP, all the networks to really talk about us with your giving circles so we can then, communicate to them and gather all the information to, facilitate these partnerships. Because the issue is that when we got that first research, right? And 4 years later, we're putting it in a directory and we saw a lot of email addresses of people that were not part of the giving circles anymore, or, giving circles that, didn't exist anymore. So the cleaning of the data has been a challenge, and it's an everyday challenge, right, Emily? And also, this why the need of the new research was because every time I'm in a room like this talking about the latest research in 2016, people look at me like, my God, that was 100 years ago, right? It seems like 100 years ago because so many things have happened. So actually, Philanthropy Together was going to do the research in 2025, but we said last year, okay, we cannot wait. We need to do this. And research takes, yes, go. Yes, see it. Research takes a lot of time. It is really hard. So this time, and I want to give a big shout out to the Low Start Foundation, to the Kellogg Foundation, and Fidelity to, for funding the qualitative part of this research. This research started more than a year ago by two lead researchers, Michael Layton from the Johnson Center for Philanthropy, and Adriana Lozon Ceballos, who was a researcher on the research that I mentioned with the Latino Community Foundation and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Adriana wrote her dissertation, her doctoral dissertation around giving circles. And this, this connection of giving circles and civic engagement, and also around mental health. So anyway, they started doing the research. We had, I have learned so much about research and all the steps that needs to happen before even putting the survey out. We had two surveys, one at the member level, one at the giving circle level. And they were open for 5 months, people. This is way longer than any other survey. We communicated up and down, and you may have received emails from us and from Philanos and from your giving circle leader. Big shout out to Lauren from the Impact the Palm Beaches, because literally they said, we're having a meeting, send me a bunch of QR codes. Instead of doing karaoke, we're just going to put some music and give people 10 minutes to fill out the survey. So anyway, long story short to say, the survey was great.
Anyone in the room take the survey?
Who took the survey? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm missing a lot of hands there. Why it's important to have, participation? Because if we don't hear from you, we don't know how can we support you. So anyway, right now we're at the moment where the researchers are analyzing all the data. starting to, build out the reports. There are going to be 3 different reports. So one kind of like the census of giving circles, how many circles they are, how much money are they moving, et cetera, et cetera. This time we went a lot deeper than in 2016 because we wanted also to figure out who are those organizations that giving circles are supporting, not just okay, is my giving circle giving to women and girls? But what kind of organization is being supported? Is it a small grassroots organization? Is it a huge national organization? Is that organization led by a woman of color? Like we wanted a lot more nuances. So it's taken a long time for the researchers to do all this analysis. There is going to be another report around community foundations and host institutions. Back in 2016, more than 50% of giving circles were hosted in community foundations. Why? Because, I know that Philanos giving circles are 501c3s, but smaller giving circles are mostly have a fiscal sponsor, or, they used to like one of the members collect checks and send the checks to the nonprofit. Thanks to, technology, grapevine technology platforms, a lot of giving circles are now, managing their funds in an easier way, right?
So Sara.
Yes.
You've got 2 minutes to give us the highlights of the new research.
Yes, move it, please.
I could Sara all
okay,
day.
so I am going to give, and I'm sorry about this slide because these are kind of unofficial numbers. Here, because I cannot see all the way over there. These are the unofficial numbers, and the researchers are kind of like, maybe we don't even know I'm sharing this. But this is very exciting, right? 69% of groups offer general operating and unrestricted funding. This is very different from 6 years ago because a lot was, tied to a project. So this is very exciting about trust-based methods. 63% of groups ask their members to find and nominate potential recipients. 35% of groups do not ask for written applications or reports. Thank you, giving circles. We don't want to make our nonprofits jump through hoops for a $10,000 grant. Please. Or 20,000 or 50,000. Like we need to trust our organizations, especially if we have been supporting them for years. Don't ask them to fill out again their mission and vision on a piece of paper. 18% of groups do not have an application or reporting process, so totally trust-based. Democratic decision-making, 50% of groups have members vote for recipients. 27% of groups decide through consensus. My hat goes off to them because we know that consensus is hard and it's messy, especially in larger giving circles. Next slide, please. Local. I love the place-based local, resources to local groups. Community knows what community needs and people from the same communities. 97% have some form of geographic focus in their funding. 89% of members report making donations in addition to their contribution to their giving circle. And this is important because, yes, people that participate in giving circles tend to give more. Like just think when you started in your giving circle, how have your giving increased? And again, not only monetary donations, but you are donating your time, your talents, your testimony. 39% of members report making an additional donation to the same organization because you care about them. You build a relationship. And that is, kind of our mantra all the time. Giving circles are about building relationships. It's not transactional. It's not crowdfunding. It's intentional. And around centering equity, and this is very exciting because we knew, and I told Tony several times, we knew it anecdotally that all the new giving circles that got started were having, some kind of racial equity in their ethos. And now we have the data, right? 60% of groups intentionally seek to address racial and ethnic equity through their approach to grant making. So this is, I know, is just a little bit like a amuse bouche to the reports. The reports are coming out next year, at the beginning of the next year. The full report will be ready by We Give Summit, which is in May. It's a virtual summit, free. Please join us. And what we're doing now is the second part of the research funded by Fidelity, which is focus groups. We want to get into the nitty-gritty of how giving circles are working and supporting communities.
Thank you, Sara. This is why you come to Philanos. You get to access to this data. So we are about to wrap up. I am so grateful for Jeannie and Sara for all their time today, as well as for Susan for being our session organizer. Thank you.
Yes.
I want to close on something that Jeannie said, right? The women in this room, you are smart, thoughtful, strategic givers. And as we leave this conference and we go to our coffee networking, I'm just so inspired by all the conversations that we've had the last couple of days. And I'm so hopeful, right? I'm hopeful for our communities. I'm hopeful for the local nonprofits that get to benefit from all of your generosity. So with that, big round of applause to Jeannie and Sara. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.